The last story here, which is Briahna Joy Gray and Khanna, because Bree did ask Khanna about the concessions that the Freedom Caucus was fighting for and whether or not force the vote would have been a good idea for the left as well. Whether or not he looks back on it and says, oh, maybe we should have asked for something. You gotta listen to this. I have so much to say.
California Representative Khanna appeared on Fox News yesterday and shared that he would consider voting for a moderate Republican for House Speaker. Let's take a look.
I would consider the right Republican, someone I could trust, Brian Fitzpatrick, Mike Gallagher, who actually spoke eloquently on the floor, David Joyce. But there need to be two conditions. One, you can't have debt ceiling, the debt ceiling debate or shut down as something that takes the country hostage. And two, there'd have to be some agreement on subpoena power. But I'm open to a Republican who could work to put the interests of the American people first.
So there is Khanna admitting that he's willing to, if need be, vote for a Republican. But people want to smear me as right wing, and I've never voted for a Republican. At the end of the day, both parties protect corporate interest. That's why he's willing to do that. Let's go on, because I want to get to the part where Bree confronts him about force the vote.
Representative Khanna joins us now to discuss. Welcome, Khanna.
Wait a minute. He does this. He did this last time too. Watch this. Watch his facial expression.
People first.
Representative Khanna joins us now to discuss. Welcome.
At first he was like, and then he goes,
Congressman.
Thanks for having me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So for those of us who were interested in these leverage opportunities back in the force the vote realm, it's really nice to hear you talking about this kind of concretizing list of asks that the left, that progressives, that Democrats could get out of the obstruction that's happening right now in Congress. You know, you've mentioned the debt ceiling. AOC mentioned, I believe it was yesterday, that there could be some committee appointments that come out of this. How likely do you think it is that you'll get those kinds of concessions? And if it's likely, why not run up the score and try to get as much as possible in this moment?
Well, I do agree with you, Briahna. We should try to run up the score. And the biggest thing would be if we could get 6 Republicans to vote for Hakeem Jeffries. And let's see, but that should be the first goal to try to get the Republicans to vote for Hakeem. If that doesn't work, what I've said is we need to have not just the personality of the right Republican, but concrete concessions, that they don't hold this country a hostage to a debt ceiling debate. As it is, there are people on the far right talking about not raising the debt ceiling. That would be catastrophic for the world economy, that they commit to not shutting down the government, that there are equal appointments on the committees so that we have equal subpoena power and can shut down frivolous investigations. These are all things that we should demand.
It's so great to see you. Last time you were here, I said that you sounded more like an America First populist than like a Democrat, and you made fun of me and laughed at me and said that I was erasing your whole progressive record, but I think I'm being somewhat vindicated here. Is there anything you can tell us about behind the scenes conversations that you're having, either with Republicans or with fellow Democrats about, potentially crossing that aisle?
Well, there are informal conversations, but I don't think there's been anything formal to that end. They are still, the Republicans, trying to get Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker. Now, I know there's some Democrats who are upset that I even floated this, but what is the alternative? The alternative is to get a Kevin McCarthy or a Scalise with commitments to the far right, where we're going to have a debt ceiling showdown, where we're going to have a shutdown, and where we're going to have frivolous investigations into Hunter Biden.
Pause that part right there. First of all, I'm gonna go back for a second, but I want to address something that he said there, just a couple of seconds. when he says, what is the alternative? You either get Kevin McCarthy or you get a Scalise who's further to the right, as Ro Khanna is saying there. That's not true. They could have nominated anyone else to be Speaker of the House. They could have nominated Justin Amash. They could have nominated him. They could have nominated someone. You don't even have to be there. We talked about this on Call-In a couple nights ago. You don't even have to be in Congress to be nominated for Speaker of the House. So here's Ro Khanna trying to play the American people. He's trying to give this impression like, well, if you weren't going to get Kevin McCarthy, we were going to end up with like this Trump-like far right extreme figure. That's the same type of rhetoric that was told to us when it was Bernie Sanders against Joe Biden in the final round of the Democratic primary debate. That's the same thing that was told to us. Well, you better vote for Joe Biden because if Bernie Sanders wins, you're going to end up with Trump. You see how they play this game? This second piece here, this is a very telling moment. And if I was Ro Khanna, I would look, he should probably backtrack this. Listen to this.
Scalise with commitments to the far right, where we're going to have a debt ceiling showdown, where we're going to have a shutdown, and where we're going to have frivolous investigations into Hunter Biden.
We're going to have frivolous investigations into Hunter Biden. Why is that a problem? Do you hear Ro Khanna saying the quiet part out loud? Well, we can't bring forth someone other than Kevin McCarthy because they're going to try to investigate Hunter Biden. So if Hunter Biden did something wrong, if there's a crime that he has done here, why should he not be investigated just because he's the president's son? Do you see how Ro Khanna said that? That is Ro Khanna telling you that you cannot have an investigation into Hunter Biden because of who he is. You see how they cover for their own? If I was Ro Khanna, I would walk that statement back. Let's go on. Let's pretend it wasn't Hunter Biden. Let's pretend it was Donald Trump's son. Would he have a problem with that? Would he have a problem with somebody investigating Donald Trump Jr.? No, he only has a problem with it because it's Joe Biden's son. Let's go on.
I'd rather that we either try for Hakeem as Speaker or we try for a Republican who's going to make concessions. And that's why I floated the idea.
Congressman Khanna, it's not a real possibility that Republicans would cross the aisle to vote for Hakeem Jeffries, is it?
Well, look, there are a few Republicans in swing districts as McCarthy continues to make all these concessions to the far right that may say, I'm willing to do this, or Republicans who may be willing to retire, who may be thinking of running for the Senate or governor. Do I think it's a likely scenario? No. But is it worth pursuing? Absolutely. We should try to pursue it at this time where the Republican Party is really facing chaos.
I mean, I ask in part because it's an interesting posture for a progressive like yourself to be in, to be advocating for someone like Hakeem Jeffries, who has been so historically hostile to progressives in the House. Obviously, there was the big kerfuffle earlier this year, or last year rather, about the CPC, the Congressional Progressive Caucus's choice to endorse Shontel Brown over Nina Turner. Pramila Jayapal and Nina Turner both worked on the Bernie Sanders campaign, as you did. It was felt to many people to be like a betrayal of what it meant to be on the Progressive Caucus in the first place. Hakeem Jeffries has co-founded this super PAC that's aimed at defeating progressive challengers to attack Democratic incumbents from the left. And this is the person that there's an effort to generate energy around for the speakership. Is there any conversation happening about progressives using this opportunity to talk about who they would prefer to be as a speaker that would better represent the interests of the left flank of the Democratic Party?
As you know, Hakeem Jeffries is part of the Progressive Caucus.
So he says, as you know, Hakeem Jeffries is a part of the Progressive Caucus. And so was Jim Clyburn. So was Shontel Brown. So was Ted Lieu. Just because someone is a part of the Progressive Caucus doesn't mean that they're actually for some of these progressive policies. So if Hakeem Jeffries is against a Green New Deal with Medicare for all, the question that we should be asking Ro Khanna is, why are these people even a part of the Progressive Caucus? Why doesn't Bernie Sanders step up and say anything here? He's one of the co-founders of the Progressive Caucus. Bernie Sanders don't have an opinion on these whack-ass politicians that joined his caucus, and they're not even progressive? Seem like to me, all you have to be is a Democrat to join. You don't even really have to support the ideas. So that's Ro Khanna's excuse. Because he's a part of the Progressive Caucus, we need to support Hakeem Jeffries. Where does Hakeem Jeffries stand on the issues, Ro Khanna? Let's go on.
He has sat down with Progressive Caucus members. He sat down with all of the caucus, and he had 212 votes. It was unanimous. Now, are there areas that I am more progressive than Hakeem Jeffries? Sure. I am for Medicare for all, for Bernie Sanders' version and bill. I am for free public college. I am for making sure.
So then how is Hakeem Jeffries even progressive, Ro Khanna? You already listed 3 items and you're still calling him progressive. By the way, he uses the same talking point on multiple interviews. He used that talking point on my interview when he goes, now, is he as progressive as I am or as you and I would like? No, but he used that same talking point with me. So tell me what's left. He got one more item.
That we have very, very robust protections for labor unions and organizing, and really should have gotten rid of the parliamentarian to get the $15 minimum wage in the Senate. But those are things.
4 things. And he's still claiming that Hakeem Jeffries is progressive.
Things that we can advocate strongly for, and we have a better shot at doing that with Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker than with Kevin McCarthy.
But Representative Khanna, I'm sorry to belabor this, but surely you can see how folks looking at the past 2 years of the Biden administration and what happened with Nancy Pelosi in the speakership chair, who is a stronger leader than Hakeem Jeffries just because of her legacy and the power that she's generated over the time that she's been in Congress. None of those agenda items, none of those progressive agenda items have been advanced. We saw the maneuvers that got the $15 minimum wage killed and stripped from the American Rescue Plan. We saw how the Build Back Better bill was bifurcated so that all the good progressive stuff could be junked at the earliest opportunity and blamed on Manchin and Sinema. We've seen people completely stop talking about Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, which Hakeem Jeffries has been, very critical of and won't sign on to, even though he's a New York congressman. Why should progressives, why should people generally on the left, broadly, including the 30% of voters who voted for Bernie Sanders, believe that there could be any sincere progress on any of those core popular issues with Hakeem Jeffries and with the gavel in the leadership?
Okay, so Bree just pointed out all the things that they're not doing. All the things, including them not talking about Medicare for all anymore. She just went through that whole list of items that they're not doing. Listen to Ro Khanna's response.
Chip spot.
Well, because we did make progress in the last.
Oh my God, I can't. Because we did make progress. Watch the items that he tells you were progress. Listen to
broadly, including the 30% of voters who voted for Bernie Sanders, believe that there could be any sincere progress on any of those core popular issues with Hakeem Jeffries and with the gavel in the leadership spot.
Well, because we did make progress in the last 2 years. We made progress on getting a child tax credit. We made progress on massive American Rescue Plan investment.
He says the same thing every time. He keeps mentioning the child tax credit, which was cut short. That was cut short. He keeps mentioning the American Rescue Plan, which didn't rescue a lot of us because he has nothing else to point to. It's the same thing every time. She just gave you a list of items, $15 minimum wage, them not talking about Medicare for all. She gave you a number of items, and his response is, well, we have made progress. Like, no, you didn't. You really haven't. And by the way, he said nothing about Medicare for all. She mentioned Medicare for all. He said nothing. Let's go on.
in our public schools, in our
temporary
communities.
policies that expired, Representative. That's people's concern, that there were these pandemic era policies that were very popular and effective, but those were allowed to lapse, and now people feel like it's back to business as usual, and that the progressive momentum has been completely killed.
See this point right here. I'm glad she got a chance to do this. I know Batya's on this as well, but I'm glad she got a chance to challenge him on this and tell him it was temporary.
With the gavel in the leadership spot.
Well, because we did make progress in the last 2 years. So we made progress on getting a child tax credit. We made progress on massive American Rescue Plan investment in our public schools.
Temporary
in our
policies that expired, Representative. That's people's concern, that there were these pandemic era policies that were very popular and effective, but those were allowed to lapse, and now people feel like it's back to business as usual. And
he wasn't ready for that. Look at the look on Ro Khanna's face. Look at the expression on his face. He's like, well, damn, I thought I had that one. It works when I say it on MSNBC. It works when I say it on CNN. Damn it, the hell. It's not working this time. Fuck.
That the progressive momentum has been completely killed.
Well, I think that's not giving Senator Sanders and the progressive movement enough credit. I mean, that also led to the historic climate legislation. Now, it's not what you or I would have wanted, $300 billion.
Told you. He says this every time. I told you. Same line, you guys. It's not what you and I would have wanted. Listen.
Well, I think that's not giving Senator Sanders and the progressive movement enough credit. I mean, that also led to the historic climate legislation. Now, it's not what you or I would have wanted, 300.
I told you. He says the same line.
Billion over 10 years. I mean, I'm on the Thrive Act, which is talking about $1 trillion investment every year in really a transformation of our clean economy. But I do think that the progressive this is growing. We have Greg Cesar, we've got Jonathan Jackson, many members. We're going to continue to advocate. Do I think we can get these goals without a progressive president? No. Do I think ultimately we need to take back the House? Yes. But we're making progress, and the progress would be much more with the Jeffries than with any Republican.
In other words, let me break that down for you and make this a little bit quicker. In other words, nothing is happening anytime soon. He told me the same thing. No progressive president is not going to happen. And you have to have the Senate too. So he told me the same thing.
Having control.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about something you tweeted yesterday. You wrote millions of Americans have seen their livelihoods evaporate due to 30 years of bad trade deals that shipped manufacturing jobs overseas. And then you wrote hashtag economic patriotism is how we can begin to reverse this process and deliver for the people again. I love this. I also loved it when this was Steve Bannon's agenda for getting Trump elected. He famously said, we want them talking about racism all day and identity politics day and night. Well, we're going to win with, he called it, of course, economic nationalism. I'm wondering if that chimes for you as well, or if I'm just trying to belabor this point that you have a lot of potential partners on the right when it comes to this kind of economic populism.
She's a little too friendly, this one. A little too chipper for me. Not feeling it.
I believe that these trade deals were terrible. NAFTA, the WTO, we made a colossal mistake letting our factories go offshore. I think the difference with economic patriotism is it doesn't reject the value of immigrants. It doesn't reject the value of engaging in a global economy. It simply says that America ought to lead there. America ought to be investing in our factories. And philosophically, where I disagree with Steve Bannon and the Trump agenda, is their view of it was let's get the corporate tax cuts and that would somehow bring these factories back. I know a lot of these corporate CEOs in my district. If Intel would take the tax cut and put the factories in Malaysia, I think what we need is the government to say we're going to invest in these companies, if they invest in America and in American labor. And so it's a different philosophy. I'd say it has more in common with FDR than with Steve Bannon. But to the extent people want to be for the goal of bringing factories back and bringing industry back in this country, I'll work with anyone. I have a bill with Marco Rubio to try to do that.
I think when they start when they have this discussion about bringing factories back to America, I think they need to break down, and by they, I mean the politicians need to break down to Americans what that would actually look like, because I've talked to a number of people who have told me that they have this vision in their mind of going back to the old school days with all of the factories during the time of the Great Migration, where you had all of these factories in places like a Pittsburgh and like a Detroit. And I think what some people may not understand is that because of technology, it'll never go back to the way that it used to be. This whole concept of having these manufacturing plants and factories all across the country where all these people are just lined up on an assembly line and they just punch in and punch out, that is no longer so much the case, and things are going to be different. You've seen this somewhat also in the automotive industry, where some of these jobs have been replaced by AI. So there's so much more technology now. And I think when they use this phrase, we're going to bring factories back to the US, they need to really break down and paint a picture for the American people what that will actually look like. I think they should do something like that going forward.
Khanna, you mentioned a little while ago that you don't think any number of progressive priorities will be pursued absent having a progressive candidate, perhaps more progressives represented in Congress. I wonder what you think when you look at how much leverage these 20 rebellious Republicans have garnered for themselves, not by having a Republican in the White House and not by having overwhelming majorities in the House or a majority at all in the Senate, but by using this procedural maneuver, by exploiting the fact that they have a narrow margin so that a small number of people can hold up the entire government's agenda. Do you look at that and say, given the lack of likelihood that progressives are going to have these overwhelming majorities or to win the White House in the near future, and given the gravity of the crises that we are facing as a country, the healthcare crises, the housing crises, and on and on and on and on, do you have regrets about progressives not using that opportunity to do the same thing back in 2021 when there was a force the vote moment whereby progressives could be the ones that are grandstanding right now, and instead of talking about vague procedural issues, really highlighting substantive concerns and holding the Democratic Party hostage until they deliver on things like, let's say, for example, immediately signing an executive order to cancel all student debt before it could be obstructed by the courts.
So she's asking him if he has any regret that force the vote wasn't done. Listen to what Ro Khanna says.
Well, I heard the sense of urgency, but I think your adjective of grandstanding is accurate of what people on the right are doing. Look, it's easy if your ideology is we just want to shut everything down. We don't want to raise the debt ceiling. We want to shut government down. Maybe they'll succeed in doing that, though right now it's unclear if they're going to get any of their policy recommendations.
He's not being honest. I told you the concessions. We went through this. He's just making it seem like the only thing that they wanted to do was just shut the government down. I told you what they were asking for.
But on the progressive left, we have something which is far tougher. We're telling people to affirmatively pass legislation, create Medicare for all, create dental, vision, and hearing benefits for seniors, raise the wage. You can't do that just by a sense of we're going to blow the place up. We've got to.
And what he just said right there, that proves my point. Let's backtrack one more time to what he says about why they can't do it on the left. Listen to
Look,
this.
it's easy if your ideology is we just want to shut everything down. We don't want to raise the debt ceiling. We want to shut government down. Maybe they'll succeed in doing that, though right now it's unclear if they're going to get any of their policy recommendations. But on the progressive left, we have something which is far tougher. We're telling people to affirmatively pass legislation, create Medicare for all, create dental, vision, and hearing benefits for seniors, raise the wage. You can't do that just by a sense of we're going to blow the place up. We've got.
What he just said right there, that proves my point, which is this strategy of putting progressives through the Democratic Party in the House. This strategy does not work because Ro Khanna just admitted to you himself we have to pass the legislation. And the legislation is not going to pass. Do you guys see my point? He just admitted it. And let's say we did get 100 more progressives in the House. By the way, this is not happening overnight. We did get 100 more progressives in the House. Okay. Then you got to get it to pass in the Senate. Then you have to have a real progressive president who is going to sign it, because the president can veto it. So based on what Khanna just said right there, what is the point of putting progressives through the Democratic Party in DC? Let him go on.
To actually get people to draft the legislation, support the legislation. So I think the tactics are different because we're trying to build something. They're trying to just blow up institutions by their own.
But they're not trying to build anything, though. You're not building anything. You're not building. Look, Roger said something to me yesterday, and I think this is correct. Roger said he believes the reason why people are at each other's throats, like in the left media space per se, and on Twitter, is because when it comes to the progressive movement, we haven't received any wins. We got those politicians elected, but since they've been there, we haven't won anything. So everybody's snapping at each other and taking bites at each other. But Khanna just proved my point. There's no way. If you can't pass let's talk about legislation, okay? When you look at congressmen and women's approval rating, part of that is based on getting things done, passing legislation. And if you look at the progressives, AOC, her approval rating is lower than Hillary Clinton's. They're not getting nothing done. We haven't had any real wins. And this goes back to this piece as well, because I've said this multiple times. You still, in the end, you have to pass the legislation. You have to pass it in the House. You have to pass it in the Senate. And then the president has to actually sign off on it. And I think that until you have all those lined up in a row, and you have to have corporate money out of electoral politics, let's be real. These things are not going to, even if, let's say, someone like a Marianne Williamson, let's say she did become president. Let's say she did, hypothetically speaking here. Even if she were to do an executive order for these progressive policies, the House can veto it. So this is Khanna. He's actually revealing himself. He's revealing this progressive strategy to the point that he's showing you, without passing legislation, none of these things are going to work.
Their own definition of what they consider success.
Do you believe that Nancy Pelosi would not have acquiesced? I'm sorry, Batya, but do you believe that she would not have acquiesced, that she would have risked the gavel, had voting go on for days or weeks, et cetera, instead of exchanging it for something as simple as committing to signing the executive order to cancel student debt, or let's say actually having the floor vote on the bill to vote to see if you can end insider trading in the House, something which people have argued, and it's been reported on, that she quietly killed because she's expressed displeasure at being prevented from trading as a Congress member? Do you think that she would have, basically not acquiesced to those kind of demands? And if you believe she would have acquiesced to those kind of demands, do you have regrets over not actually trying to get those real concrete concessions for the left?
Well, look, I support, obviously, the ban on stock trading. That came up about months into her speakership. At the time of the speakership, what people were talking about was Medicare for all. And I don't think she would have acquiesced to being able to deliver Medicare for all, because the votes aren't there right now in the House of Representatives. So my view of...
He is focusing on one singular issue. The question that she was asking him is, does he have any regrets trying not to get any type of concession? She didn't just say Medicare for all, any type of concession on the left. Do you have any regrets not trying to get concessions out of Nancy Pelosi? His thing is, well, I don't think she would have acquiesced because the request was Medicare for all and we didn't have the votes and yada, yada, yada. But we didn't get anything. So when people bring up force the vote, it doesn't necessarily just have to be Medicare for all. They could have asked for anything else. Nothing. And I don't mean you got some committee assignments. I'm talking about for the rest of us, the ones who put them in office. They didn't ask for anything. What the fuck are they there for? Why you go there and pretend like you're going to do something you're not going to do? Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, you're both on CNN. You're both on there making it seem like you're not sure if you're going to vote for Nancy Pelosi for speaker. Oh, I remember. How dare you gaslight the American people that way? How dare you get progressive hopes up that way to make it seem like you were actually going to fight when you knew damn well going in, you were going to support her? How dare you? Let's go on. He'll finish up here.
It is that we need to build a progressive caucus with people who are going to vote for it. We need to elect a progressive president or a progressive nominee. We need to change the party. If you remember in 2020, I voted against the platform of our own party because it did not have Medicare for all. We need
to build a progressive caucus. We need to change the party. But Khanna, when he came onto my show, he said he was glad he supported Hillary Clinton. So Khanna, how are you going to change the party if at the end of the day, you're still telling the progressives and you as a so-called progressive, you are going to support the corporate establishment Democrat who is against those progressive policies? How are you building anything? How are you changing anything if you were going along with the status quo? You're a cuck. You fall right in line. You ain't building shit. You ain't changing shit. You ain't tearing down nothing. Build a progressive. You have a progressive caucus. Why are people a part of the progressive caucus that don't agree with these progressive policies? Remember this for when he decides to run for president.
to start with that. Yes, could we have a grandstand and gotten in the news for a week? Sure. Do I think that would have gotten us any closer to Medicare for all or $15 wage? I honestly don't. If I thought it would.
But that would have made a national discussion about Medicare for all in this country. Look at the way that everybody is talking about the Freedom Caucus over the past couple of days. It is a national discussion. I don't think I ever watched that much C-SPAN before in my life. Okay. It has opened up the discussion. If they were to do that, if they would have forced the vote for Medicare for all, that would have opened it up to a national discussion that was beyond a Bernie Sanders campaign to show that people were still willing to fight for it. This is a mess. This is a mess, but we'll never know because they never did it.
But Representative Khanna, it could be any ask, not just Medicare for all. So we could talk about any number of executive orders. We could talk about the kind of procedural changes, pay-go exemptions, the debt ceiling, all of the things that you've said you think you could potentially get out of the Republican obstruction in this moment. Why the optimism about what you can get out of the Republicans in negotiations now, but short-sightedness about what Democrats could have gotten in the same moment in 2021?
Uh-oh.
Well, what I'm trying to get out of the Republicans are things that the speaker would agree with. I'm trying to say we need to increase the debt ceiling. We shouldn't shut down the government. We shouldn't have frivolous investigations on Biden. Pelosi or Hakeem Jeffries would agree with all of that. We're trying to get the Republicans to a place where they're concerned about governing. There are two separate questions, Briahna. One is, can we actually govern in a way that is sensible? And then the broader question, can we get progressive goals that actually help the working class? Right now, we've got the first crisis, which is just can we have sane people governing and not have this country default on the debt?
The workers to Khanna are secondary. He said we have two things to deal with here. Watch who he puts first. Listen to this, and then I'm gonna wrap up because I know you guys tired of seeing Roe.
None of the Republicans are things that the speaker would agree with. I'm trying to say we need to increase the debt ceiling. We shouldn't shut down the government. We shouldn't have frivolous investigations on Biden. Pelosi or
Why not? Why can't you have investigations on? Let me get this straight. Let me make this very clear, because these people had no problem having any type of investigations on Donald Trump. But now, because it's a member of your party, you have a problem with it. No, we cannot have any type of investigations into Joe Biden. Why not? If he's innocent, if he hasn't done anything wrong, then you shouldn't be concerned. Let me ask this question. Tara Reid accused Joe Biden of sexual assault. Is that considered a frivolous investigation, Ro Khanna? You can't have that happen either?
Jeffries would agree with all of that. We're trying to get the Republicans to a place where they're concerned about governing. There are two separate questions, Briahna. One is, can we actually govern in a way that is sensible? And then the broader question, can we get progressive goals that actually help the working class? Right.
The progressive goals to help the working class should have been first. That should have been first. This idea of him, we needed to govern in a way that is sensible. Define sensible. How does that help the working class? If you find a way to govern in a way that is sensible, so to speak, how does that help the working class people? Because it hasn't been my lifetime.
Now we've got the first crisis, which is just, can we have sane people governing and not have this country default on the debt? That isn't sufficient for our politics. We have to have broader aspirations of progressive politics. But I think the only way we get those broader progressive aspirations is winning at the local level, state level, governorships, state parties, changing the party, and having someone like Sanders ultimately win the nomination.
What did I tell you? That part that he said at the end about the local level, this is what I've been trying to tell you guys. You have to have it on the local level. You can't just, this shit is not happening anytime soon. You cannot just have these candidates from Justice Democrats going to DC. You need to have those people running for these gubernatorial races, running for these state Senate seats, these House representative seats in your state. You need to have them. You need to have them on city council. You need to have a lot of the politics is local, you guys. A lot of these people that are in DC started locally. So you need to have it on both levels. Now, I've been saying that. So Ro Khanna just laid it out, that timeline for you. See, this is what I was trying to tell you. He just told you, you need to have it all on the local level, and you have to have someone like Bernie Sanders as president. There you have it. Now, there was something Bree said the other night. Like, both me and Bree were on a Jimmy Dore show Friday night, but there was something she said about the fallout from Force the Vote. And this was pretty interesting. And I want you guys to hear this because I thought it was kind of sad. It's kind of sad that, let me just play it.
No, just that I know that people who have been supporting Force the Vote for the last 2 years have gone through a lot, that a lot of us have lost friends, has spent countless hours being antagonized on the internet. I've lost subscribers. We've all taken all kinds of hits over having this moment. People who I thought were real allies, journalists and et cetera, who've done good work, chose to make fun of the Medicare for All rallies that we threw. We worked really hard to do phone trees and calls to get Congress members on board in the fall of 2020 when this was coming down the pike. I mean, there was some real grassroots work.
Notice how she mentioned the Medicare for All marches? That's what we were telling you guys. And that's why I said that to Ryan Grimm when he was on. The people who made fun of the Medicare for All marches. The same people who said they were allies for Medicare for all. It was ridiculous.
That was done here. And I want to validate that. I want to validate Jimmy Dore's work and being a real leader in all of this and the movement, holding that town hall online that was so well attended and so important, in which so many people who have suffered greatly and lost loved ones as a consequence of not having healthcare system, guaranteed healthcare in this country. It was important. And I don't want people to memory hole all of the work that got done and all of the ways that people have suffered for keeping this message alive when it was very unpopular and when the most popular, powerful establishment parts of the left media were so arm locked and standing in solidarity against it. So I hope you are enjoying this vindication. There's a lot more work to do because force the vote moments will continue to come up over time. And as we've seen, there's a lot of hostility from parts of the left media that care more about having access and allyship with Congress members than actually fighting for the people who put those Congress members in office. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. And I hope you can briefly enjoy this little victory lap.
What I tell you. So shout out to Bree for calling that out because, I mean, she's been in this space a lot longer than I have, but even I've seen it. Even in the short time that I've been in the space, I've seen that like certain people won't call out the politicians because they don't want to lose access to the politicians. And you will lose access. You criticize them too heavily, you will not get access to them again. Maybe except for Ro Khanna because he doesn't seem to care as much. Thank you for the super chat, Delthea. So instead of a Trump clone in the speaker seat, we have a puppet of the Trump clones in Congress. Explain to me the difference. Thanks for the super chat, KD7. Roe is to politicians what Ryan Grimm is to journalists. His job is to go on left independent media to obfuscate, discourage, and flat out lie. And Delthea says, when both parties fear moving to the left, the only movement possible is to the right. It's the Cupid shuffle up in this piece. To the left, to the left, to the right, to the right. Slide, crisscross, reverse. Oh, wait, that's the cha-cha slide. Did I mix those up? I mixed up two songs.